My name is Shuprasad Koirala and welcome friend to this session of Visitor Pattern. In this session, we will try to go through the fundamentals of Visitor Pattern. We will try to understand what is Visitor Pattern. We will go through a sample source code, and I'm sure that at the end of the tutorial, you'll be able to understand what Visitor Pattern means. They fall into the behavioral categories of design patterns, the first important thing. So they will help us to change the behavior, or we can say they will help us to solve the behavioral issues of software architecture. Okay, so now let's get to the main fundamental of visitor pattern. Why do we need to use visitor pattern? Normally in projects, you have data structures like customer data, address data, so these kind of classes which hold uh, data. Okay, and then you have different logics on it which you can apply. Okay, for example, let's say that you have a customer class. Okay, and then you have validation logic on it. Okay, now these validation logics can be different under different conditions. Okay, so means what? You have a data and then you have logics. So visitor pattern helps us to separate the logic from the data structure. By doing this, you can add new logic to your current data structure. Okay, and you don't need to change and you don't need to touch the data structure. You can change the data structure and you don't need to change the logic. So it's like, you can say visitor pattern helps us to decouple the data structure and the logic. So before applying visitor pattern, you should ask yourself a question saying that do I need to is my problem related to separating the logic and the data structure? If the answer is yes, then please go ahead and implement visitor pattern. So here's a simple example. I have a customer can have address, and address can have phone. So very complicated data structure. So this is my complete data structure. Okay, my spelling is wrong. Sorry for that. So this is my customer data structure. Now this is my string logic. So basically my string logic can run through this data structure and give me output of string. My XML logic will run through the data structure and give me output of XML. Tomorrow, I can just add a CSV logic here without even touching this data structure, and it just runs through it and gives me a CSV output. So in short, visitor pattern is all about separating the data structure from the logic. This logic, because this logic runs through the customer, it is not something which is permanent resident inside the data structure. It is called as visitor, because in general terms, a visitor means who comes, who stays for some days and goes. Okay, so basically your logic and XML logic, the logic classes, they just run through the customer data structure, but they don't stay inside the customer. They just run it and they just give the output. So these are visitors. So visitors are nothing but logical classes, or you will say the classes which contain logic. So what we'll do is that, we'll take the same example, okay, and try to implement a source code of it. Okay, or we'll try to do actual implementation of it. So here's what I have. Here's my visitor. This is my interface. Okay, and here's my string visitor. Okay, and here's my XML visitor. So basically these both classes have actual logic which will do the work of converting which will do the work of running through the object and uh, what you call parsing them into either XML or string. Now every of this the visitor classes takes in, you know the data structure classes like customer, address, phones. So you can see that this visitor string takes as a customer object. Okay, and it does some kind of operations on it. At this moment, it just converts a string. So it takes a customer name and just concatenates into string. It takes there's the other visitor visit method. It is again overloaded. Okay, because the first one is for the customer, this is for the address. Now this actually uses the address object and flattens into a string. Takes the phone object and flattens to a string. Same way the XML class also does the same thing. It takes each of these objects and does operations on it. So we can say visitor class basically will have multiple overloaded visit methods which will take the data structure. Okay, the parent and the child data structures um, and do operations on it. Okay. Now what happens at the other end, the data structure end? At the data structure end, this is a bit complicated, so please pay attention for it. You have the customer class. Okay. I'm just taking one data structure. You have customer, address, phones. We'll come to that. I'll show you a complete picture of it. This customer class takes a visitor because, as I said, the visitor goes inside the data structure and runs through it. Takes the visitor, and then this customer class is passed inside the visitor. So when you do this, it actually goes inside the visitor class over here. So it actually runs here. So I'll again repeat. The customer object or the data structure classes, will have an accept method, or probably you can give some other name for it. I'm just taking it as accept, and you pass the visitor. It's XML visitor or probably a string visitor, and this visitor class is then again pass back the same object. And by doing when we do this, it actually goes and runs the code what is necessary to parse the object. So for example, it will actually go and run this code, okay, because he actually calls himself. So here's how it goes now. Here's a visitor objects, okay, visitor interface actually. If you remember that we had two visitor classes, one is the string logic and one is the XML. This visitor class is actually passed to the accept, and then again it is he again pass what you call calls the visitor object. Then he again goes and calls, because this customer class also has addresses, okay, so it runs through all the address objects and calls their visitor. Okay, now the address class calls his own visitor and also calls all of its phones visitor. Okay, accept method of the phones. The phone actually runs and calls his visitors. So you can say that the whole class starts calling the visit method, and because the visit method is overloaded, you know they keep passing to the visit method, and visit method parses and gives the output. So if you see the client code now, what I do is basically I just create the visitor string, okay, pass it to the customer and say that I want a string output, and you get a string output. If you want XML output, then you just again create an object of the visitor XML, so the CLS XML, pass it to the customer and say that please display me a XML output. What we'll do is that we will look into the code, how it exactly looks like. Here's the code. My this is my what you call the data structure class. Okay, customer has address. This is the array list of address. Okay, every address has phones, so every address has phones, and this is my phones. Okay, every phones, basically every data structure class takes in the visitor object, so you can say that this is the phone class which takes the accept method. In the accept method it takes a visitor. Address class in the accept method takes a visitor. Customer class in the accept method takes a visitor, right? And now if I go to my visitor class, nothing special, it's just my logic actually. So here's my CLS visitor string, and here's my CLS XML class. So basically, my visitor contains the logic. Now my client code becomes very simple. I just need to decide I just need to create the proper visitor class and pass it to the data structure, and the visitor class will run through the data structure and display me the output. So for example, I just create a visitor string object, pass it to the customer, and I get my output. Then if I want XML, I'll create an object of XML, pass it to the customer, and I will get XML object. So what we have done is basically we have separated the logics, that is the XML logic and the string logic, from the customer data. So now I'll run this program. So what you will see is basically you can either display it by string or either you can display it by XML. Cool. So so you should ask yourself again, I repeat, that don't get carried away by design patterns. Keep on asking yourself the question that what is this design pattern meant for, and then think your problem. For example, over here you should ask yourself a question that is my problem domain something like this, where I need to add new logics, and uh, my current data structure should not change, or does my project does is my project so dynamic that tomorrow, I will be keeping on adding new logic, and which will lead to also change of my data structure. So if you have such kind of scenarios, where you want to separate the logic from the data structure, implement visitor pattern. So ask yourself a question. Probably what you can do is that you can keep those one-liners of design patterns in your mind. For example, if you go through the notes, right, you will see those one liners. For example, uh, abstract factory pattern is nothing but extension of factory pattern. Singleton pattern basically creates a single instance of our object. So visitor pattern is basically all about separating logic from the data structure. Keep those one liners in mind. Okay, whenever you come through a problem, just remember that one liner. Okay, what you can do is, for some 1 or 2 months, you can just carry a simple chit with you which has those one liners. If you have a problem, right, just go through the chit. Don't shy off of reading that chit, whenever you have an issue. And if the answer is yes, then go into the details of the design pattern. I hope that this session was useful, and you have understood what basically is a visitor pattern. If you have any doubts or suggestions, that you want to improve this video, you can mail me at shivan_queral@yahoo.com.